October 1921. Harlan County, Nebraska. Elias Corwin is standing at the edge of his west field when the sheriff's deputy rides in. He isn't looking at the deputy. He's looking at the machine. A 1914 International Harvester Mogul 816, still warm, still ticking, sitting in the furrow where his neighbor left it the night before his funeral. 6 years old, 3 owners already dead, and Elias Corwin is about to become the 4th man to take the wheel. The Mogul 8-16 was not a cursed machine by design. It was built in Chicago, Illinois, by International Harvester, a working man's tractor, priced at $675, weighing approximately 5,000 pounds, powered by a 616 cubic inch single-cylinder kerosene engine, producing 8 drawbar horsepower and 16 belt horsepower. It could pull a 2-bottom plow through most soils without complaint. Simple, reliable, honest iron. But this particular machine, chassis number traced through 4 county deed records, had a history that made men in 3 townships lower their voices when they spoke of it. The first man to die was Caleb Morse, the original buyer, a grain farmer from Alma, Nebraska. He purchased the Mogul in the spring of 1914, the same week the machine rolled off International Harvester's Chicago Tractor Works floor. By harvest of 1915, Morse was gone. A tractor rollback on a creek bank, nobody watching, body found at dusk. The machine was undamaged. The second owner, a livestock man named Rupert Graff, lasted 2 seasons before a fire took his barn and his health with it. The tractor stood in the open field, untouched. If you want to see how one machine passed through 7 hands, and how each of those hands met something it could not recover from, here's what I ask. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying this reached you. Hit subscribe if this story already has its hooks in you. Drop a like if the weight of it moved you. And tell us in the comments, have you ever heard of a machine with a history like this? Back to the Mogul, back to 1914. But to understand how this happened, we have to go back. The year is 1914. America's farms are in transition. Steam traction engines, massive, expensive, labor-intensive, are beginning to yield ground to a new kind of machine. International Harvester, headquartered in Chicago, has just introduced the Mogul 8-16 to meet a specific demand. The family farmer who cannot afford the iron giants of the prairie, but who cannot afford to keep losing ground to men with more mechanical muscle. At $675, the Mogul is priced within reach. The first production year ships approximately 3,800 units. Caleb Morse of Alma, Nebraska, was among the first buyers. He was 44 years old, a second-generation grain farmer with 320 acres of hard-worked Harlan County loam. He had used horses his entire career. The Mogul was his first tractor. According to county records and a 1923 retrospective published in the Harlan County Register, Morse paid cash, a detail neighbors still remembered a decade later, because cash was rare in that country in that year. He took delivery in April 1914, and by the first week of May, he was breaking sod with it. The single-cylinder engine thumped across the flat horizon, audible from a mile away. The Mogul's engine deserves a moment of attention, because it explains both the machine's appeal and its menace. The 616 cubic inch single-cylinder ran on kerosene, cheap, widely available, the fuel of working farms. It was hopper-cooled, meaning water in a simple tank surrounding the cylinder absorbed engine heat. No radiator, no fan, no complexity. The vertical exhaust stack vented both fumes and steam from the cooling water, producing a signature column of white smoke that could be seen from adjacent farms. 1 gear forward, 1 reverse, a hand-operated clutch on the left, a belt pulley clutch wheel on the right. That was the entire operating interface. The first autumn with the machine went well. Morse harvested nearly his entire 320 acres with minimal horse support, a fact he noted in his farm ledger with visible satisfaction. But the spring of 1915 brought trouble. He had a creek bank crossing on the south end of the property, a low wooden bridge meant for wagon traffic, gave way under the Mogul's approximately 5,000-pound frame. The The tractor did not go fully into the water. It tipped sideways, engine still running. Morse, thrown clear, was found unconscious on the opposite bank. He lived for 6 more months. Caleb Morse died in November 1915. The county death record lists cause as complications from internal injury. He was 45 years old. His widow, unable to operate the Mogul alone, sold it the following spring to Rupert Graff, a livestock farmer from the neighboring section. Graff was skeptical of tractors. He bought the Mogul for the belt pulley work alone, threshing, grinding, running a water pump, and refused to ever drive it across the creek bank where Morse had gone down. Graff's son later told a county historian that his father never quite trusted the machine, but used it heavily for 2 full seasons without incident. The fire came in August 1917. At Graff's main barn, a structure holding grain, equipment, and most of his year's hay supply, burned to the ground on a dry Saturday night. The Mogul was outside. It survived without damage. Graff did not die in the fire, but he suffered smoke inhalation severe enough to leave him bedridden through the winter. By March 1918, he had sold his property and moved to Hastings, Nebraska, where he died 2 years later of pneumonia, aged 57. The Mogul passed to a third party through the property auction. A man named Vernon Shell paid $80 for it, a fraction of its original value, and hauled it home on a wagon. Vernon Shell was the third owner. He was 38 years old, a dryland wheat farmer from Harlan County, Nebraska, and by all surviving accounts a methodical, careful man. He replaced the Mogul's worn drive chain, repacked the wheel bearings, and put the machine back to work on a 200-acre spread west of Riverton. Shell used the tractor hard through 1918 and 1919, putting in long days during the wartime wheat boom, when prices were above $2 a bushel and every acre counted. He made money that year, good money. And then the markets fell. The post-war agricultural depression hit Nebraska hard starting in 1920. Wheat prices dropped below $1 a bushel. Land values collapsed. Men who had borrowed against good years found themselves underwater. Shell was one of them. He held on through 1920 with the Mogul, working every day he could manage. Belt work, plowing, his threshing for neighbors at a fee. But the debt was compressing. In the winter of 1921, while attempting to crank the tractor in near-freezing conditions, the hand crank backlashed and fractured his right wrist in 2 places. He never regained full use of the hand. By spring 1921, Vernon Shell was done farming. He sold the Mogul for $95 to Elias Corwin. Elias Corwin, the 4th owner, was a more careful man than the 3 before him. He was 51 years old. A Mennonite farmer with a reputation for methodical maintenance and deep caution. He had watched the machine change hands twice in his county and had heard the talk. He did not entirely dismiss it. He inspected the Mogul thoroughly before buying, checked the drive chain, tested the clutch engagement, examined the cooling water supply, and found nothing mechanically wrong. What he found instead was a machine that simply felt cold to him in a way iron shouldn't. He bought it anyway. Corwin worked the Mogul through 1921 and 1922 without incident. 2 seasons of quiet, unremarkable field work. The single cylinder thumped steadily across his fields. He kept detailed maintenance logs, records that survive in part in the Harlan County Historical Society archive, noting every oil change, every kerosene fill, every chain tension adjustment. For 2 years, nothing happened. He began to think the talk was just talk. Then, in May 1923, his eldest son Abram took the wheel for the first time to give his father a day of rest. By evening, Abram had driven the Mogul into an unmarked irrigation ditch and broken his left leg in 3 places. Abram Corwin recovered fully, but Elias was shaken. He sold the machine that autumn to a man named George Tully, a widower from Red Cloud, Nebraska, who was building a small custom threshing operation. Tully had no particular feelings about the machine's history, or claimed not to. He paid $110 for the Mogul, noting that the engine compression was still strong for a 9-year-old kerosene block and the clutch engaged cleanly. He ran the tractor as a stationary belt unit for the better part of 2 seasons, threshing grain for neighboring farms at a flat fee per bushel. He made a modest living. He was the 5th owner. He lasted 14 months. George Tully's trouble came not from the tractor itself, but from what the tractor made possible. In the fall of 1924, while the Mogul was running a belt to a grain elevator auger on a client's property near Guide Rock, Nebraska, the belt threw. It happened fast, a flat leather belt spinning at speed, thrown from the drive pulley without warning. The belt struck Tully across the left shoulder and upper arm, tearing muscle from the shoulder joint and fracturing the clavicle. He survived the injury but could no longer operate a tractor, carry grain sacks, or swing a wrench. His threshing business ended the same afternoon his belt did. Yet he sold the Mogul from a hospital bed. The 6th owner was a man about whom the historical record is thin. His name appears as Otto Renick in the Webster County tax ledger of 1925. He purchased the Mogul that winter for an undisclosed sum, and the tractor appears briefly in a 1925 equipment inventory. Nothing is known about what Renick used it for, or precisely when he stopped using it. What is known is this. By the spring of 1926, the Mogul was listed in a county sheriff's sale as part of a dissolved estate. Otto Renick had died. Yes, the cause does not appear in surviving records. The machine sold at public auction for $60. The bidder was a wheat cooperative near Innavale, Nebraska. The Innavale cooperative was the 7th and final owner. They put the Mogul to work immediately. Belt work, primarily, driving a hammer mill for feed grain grinding. By 1926, the machine was 12 years old, operating far beyond the typical service life of contemporary kerosene tractors in hard commercial use. The cooperative's foreman, a man named Dale Pruitt, recorded in a maintenance ledger that the engine was burning oil and the single-cylinder hit-miss governor was erratic. He recommended replacement. The board voted to keep running it. 3 months later, the connecting rod bearing failed without warning during a full-load grinding session. The engine destroyed itself in approximately 40 seconds. Nobody was killed when the Mogul's engine let go. Dale Pruitt was standing 6 feet away and walked away with oil burns on his forearm and a permanent distrust of single-cylinder engines. And the connecting rod punched through the cast iron block and came to rest in the soil 12 feet away. The cooling water tank drained in a cloud of steam. The tractor was finished. The cooperative scrapped the frame but kept the rear wheels, they were still serviceable, and mounted them on a wagon. The engine block lay in the yard for 3 years before someone finally broke it up for iron scrap. No marker, no record, no ceremony. Here is what we can say with certainty about the 1914 International Harvester Mogul 816 that passed through 7 hands in 12 years. It was a reliable machine, well regarded by the industry, honestly engineered, genuinely useful. It outlived its expected service life by several years. The tragedies that surrounded it were real. Accidents, illness, financial ruin, death. Whether those tragedies were caused by the machine, by the particular hard years of the Nebraska farm economy from 1914 to 1926, or by the kind of bad luck that follows working men and heavy iron through long seasons, that is a question each owner asked, and none of them fully answered. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe. Your support helps us find these machines and the men who ran them. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you've ever met a machine that carried its own weight of history. We'll see you in the next one.